since we've started making this film, we've seen a number of animals die and be butchered and slaughtered, and so they're all kind of one and the same because you see similar things. But yeah, Rome Ranch was the first time for us, and when it happened, it was really incredible because the bison goes down, and then when we were there, and maybe this is because we had a smaller group of people there, it was just like four of us. A lot of the bison definitely came up and smelled the dead bison, smelled the blood, and it was like almost every member of the herd kind of took their turn to smell and then walk away. Like they took a little moment to recognize the passing, and then they walked away. But then something really cool happened when we were trying to take the body away. Is that first of all, the whole herd did a big stampede. They all just like kicked up dust and were running around the area, just like bah. And we were like, that is really
And
intense.
chasing her down.
But one cool thing that actually happened the day before was we had gotten there the day before the harvest was going to happen, and we were in the little side by side, just sitting in the middle of the herd, and these two bison came up, and they Cody, who was the guy managing the farm at the time, and
Taylor.
Taylor both looked at us like with these wide eyes, and we are like, what? They were like, those are the two that are our options for killing tomorrow. And they're the only bison that came to see us. These two little females just came up and like looked at us, and they were like, oh my God. But then, when we were taking the body away the next day, it was moving and heartbreaking in a way because the sister, the one we didn't choose, was chasing kind of the body. She was trying to say her last goodbyes. And so there's still those hardships. But then we butchered it down and had the same experience of getting to hold the organs and see the body and see the herd go back to normal life and see them move on and not be stressed out and not be weird every time the humans came around. And then, but maybe you should describe, your experience with that, but also the sheep and everything.
Yeah, well, one thing that I just want to say is like something that our friend Jorgen said to us, which is, I think about a lot, is like these animals that we are in such a relationship with. And obviously bison are a little different because they're a little bit more wild, but they grew up in relationship with the Native Americans. Like that's just a fact. They the way that the indigenous people of this continent were managing the landscapes and managing the prairies, like there was a relationship there was a reverence and there was a respect and there was like a contract. And so what Jorgen says is that like for better or for worse, whether we like it or not, we made a contract with these animals thousands and thousands of years ago. And that part of that contract is that I will protect the herd as long as you give me sacrifice some of your herd to me so that I can eat. And so that's sort of what we can see in like many, many different kinds of systems, right? Like whether it's a pastoral system or it's a farming, just like a ranching system. And I think that we can reconnect better to that sort of contract, obviously, if we're managing our animals in a very respectful way where we're honoring their contribution to the ecology. Like, obviously, I'm not talking about like I think that the factory farming system is like such a betrayal of that contract. It's an imposition of humans over animals and thinking that we're better than them. And so I think that, there is a level of understanding and respect that's in the transference of life and death in that experience. And it was a very incredible experience to witness the bison slaughter as the first death that we really witnessed, because bison are they're such powerful animals. And I don't know if you had this experience, but it was just like this wave of energy went through the air and just like hit me, and it was just like, oh my God, like she's everywhere now. Like she was just this sort of like beam of consciousness before, like in the form of this animal, and now she's like reintegrated back into something that I can't articulate or understand, but that's like how it felt. And so that recognition in that moment of like what death is, and there's like belief associated with this, there's like ways, there's faith, there's things that I can't particularly like prove, but I think I was connected enough to my intuition at that time, and still and I think anyone who goes and witnesses a slaughter for that reason of like, I need to understand better what I'm doing here on earth, and I need to understand better what my role here is, I think that it's a common thing to have that sort of experience, and really start to understand that not only is death necessary for life, but that there is a connection and a respect and a lineage that associated with humans being in contact with that experience and really taking responsibility for it. And I don't know if you had this experience too, but like looking inside of an animal, every time I've done it since the first time at Rome Ranch, it's just like it's like I'm like tapping into this like ancestral body that's like always been there but forgot, was brought into this really weird artificial sanitized world. And then it's like you step into it and you're like, oh my god, this is what my body expects, is to see this, is to see the inside of animals, and to break animals down and to understand that this relationship with death and life. And so that was really powerful for me, is like, and we've had this experience a lot of times. Like I've also had this experience herding sheep, of like tapping in, and my body just knows what to do. Like my body just knows how to herd sheep. And I don't know if that's true for everybody, but like that was the experience that I had. It was like my body expects that this is going to be part of my
Mm.
life. And so I think that that's a really powerful experience. And that.
Yeah, what I was just gonna say, and maybe this is just particular to like herd and flock animals, but when you're, every time we've witnessed the death of an animal, it's been while they're amongst the rest of their community, and you get this sense when an animal dies next to the rest of the flock or herd that like it was never really an individual, especially with these herd animals, it's a group, it's a community, and that when an individual does die, they're almost absorbed into the community at large. You get this sense that like they didn't really go anywhere. Like they're just they become part of the larger ecosystem, and it's this really strange sense. And it's we because when Maren killed, butchered and slaughtered a sheep, it was half a foot away from a bunch of the other sheep, and the other sheep like didn't run away. They were super curious with what we were doing, and they were still cuddling with Maren even though she had like cut its throat. And they were and it wasn't even like they didn't know what was happening. Like they would smell the blood and they were like, oh, that's blood, and they were like, oh, okay, and then blah blah blah, they just go about their day. And so it doesn't seem like this isolated scary thing. It's like, oh, this is actually just part of this system. It's part of the larger network of the relationships we all have with the landscape.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people would just be like, oh, well, that's because these animals are more dumb than we are. But I don't think that that's true at all. I think that they have such a more keen awareness of what it means to be in that relationship of life and death. And, one of the things that I was just thinking as you were talking is like, I think part of the reason why we fear death as people so much, and why it's so much more devastating, and I'm not trying to minimize like how much grief is associated with death. Even killing animals, there's a level of grief and feeling, and I think that that's really important for people to feel. But because so seldom do we give back our bodies to the ecosystems that provided for us, because that doesn't happen, I think that it makes it a lot harder for us, because we have disconnected so much from this sense of like, yes, I am part of this greater life cycle, and I am only going to be here for a short amount of time, and that's okay. Like we become very attached to the individual ego. Like we ever like the world that we've lived, that we've kind of has been constructed around us, is very, very individualistic and ego driven. And so it's really hard for us to comprehend what it would feel like to die in the presence of your family or your loved ones, and it being that thing of like, oh, this person is just becoming more life for what else is all around. We don't have that. And I think that a big part of that problem is the way that we do burials. I think that when we put ourselves in boxes and don't let ourselves decay, I think that that creates like a sort of a psychic schism, for everyone around. And obviously this has been going on since like the Civil War, and so there's a bit of a reconnection that we need to have, and part of that is recognizing that there's a role that our bodies and I think our consciousness in the world plays as part of like this like soup that like brings things up and then takes things down, and it's like this like waves just go all the time, constantly. We can't destroy the matter. It doesn't ever go away. It only reincorporates into something new. And so, but that's like a scarier vision, I think, for some people than this idea that, your body is, your consciousness can be like removed from your brain and uploaded to the cloud, or like we'll go to heaven or something. Like that's like a really like egocentric, individualistic point of view of like we have to live forever because like we shouldn't be reconstituted back into this soup of life. But obviously, like, I disagree with that. I think that that's like an honor and a privilege to be able to continue life after my death, continue the life of other beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's such a nice way to describe this concept, this process that we go through. I think there's a Buddhist concept called life death, where it's like this one word hyphenated together. It's this one thing, and it's just one more way where we're disconnected from nature.